Hey everyone, welcome to Sonic Comic News for Friday, March 18th, 2011, ladies and gentlemen. 2011, Friday, March 18th, 2011. And this is big news, ladies and gentlemen. It's got some big news here. Newsarama.com, you may have heard of them, recently interviewed Ian Flynn about the Genesis storyline. Now, a lot of people have been suspecting whether or not it would be a reboot. Well, I'm about to quote something. I'm about to read something here. An article that, basically an interview and an article that Newsarama put onto the website. The link will be down below in the description box so you can see it for yourself. Now, this is the news article. It states, and this was posted yesterday at 6:15 p.m. Eastern. It states, in comic books, fans are used to retcons and reboots in an effort to keep characters young and stories fresh. Publishers find creative ways to erase or revise years of continuity to give the universes a new start. But who would have thought Sonic the Hedgehog would be in need of a reboot? Beginning this June, Sonic Genesis, a 4-part storyline in the main Sonic the Hedgehog title, is being touted as a possible, underline that word, possible reboot for the Sonic universe and its characters. The solicitation, or the title for the first issue, Sonic 226, surprised fans by stating it's an all-new beginning. And that surprise came right after a variant cover for 225 revealed that a Sonic cast member will apparently die. Now, the variant cover, as you know, is basically the sketch cover of what was supposed to be the cover. It may sound a little ominous for an all-ages title, but as readers of the comic know, Sonic the Hedgehog is more serious and complex than its whimsical covers imply. And after more than 200 issues of material, the comic is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest running comic book series based on a video game. Sonic's publisher, Archie Comics, has years of confusing history to contend with, and fans are longing for a simpler version of Sonic. Now, this is from Ian Flynn during the interview. And I quote what Ian Flynn says during this interview: as with any long-running series, you're going to generate a lot of continuity. Who's writing a lot of continuity? And this is Ian Flynn. On top of that, the Sonic comics were created back when there was a stark division between the Western and Eastern marketing campaigns, only for them to be unified in 1999. Which created drastic shifts in the property's tone and art direction. The Sonic comics have weathered all these changes and incorporated a little bit of everything, but despite the best efforts of all the creatives over the years, not everything has perfectly meshed. In other words, I think he's stating due to the fact that a lot of fans there have been complaining that not everything makes sense. Now he continues, there's always that temptation to start over. Take the best of what we have and move forward in a new, more cohesive direction. Sonic Genesis is an experiment in that direction. That and Sega was interested in us doing something special to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the franchise. That 20th anniversary is echoed by the storyline's title, Genesis, which harkens back to the original games featured on the old Sega Genesis. It was a simpler time when it was just Sonic fighting Dr. Eggman, bopping badniks, and saving little animals. Like those earlier games, Sonic Genesis is going back to a simpler premise than what's running in the main series. Flynn also pointed out, now this is back to Newsarama, Flynn also pointed out that because it's acting as a reboot, Genesis is a great point for new readers to check out Sonic. And we go back to Ian, quoting what he says, if you never picked up a Sonic book before, now would be a great time to jump in. You don't need to know anything about Sonic to pick up and enjoy the arc. Longtime readers will want to pick it up as well, to pick up on clues on how the characters return to their old selves. Now we go back to Newsarama, which states, fan favorite artist Patrick Spaz Pazansi, or Spaz, will be contributing to the interior art of Genesis, on Genesis, which begins in 226. Genesis will not involve the spin-off title Sonic Universe, which will be following a story about Scourge the Hedgehog in an interdimensional prison. Now, this is Ian again, quoting what he says about that. It'll be removed from the event in its own self-contained arc. Now we go back to Newsarama. The Genesis event will continue in the main Sonic title through the summer, ending with issue 229. Now, this is where things get interesting, folks. Ian states that after that, this is Ian again, Ian Flynn, he states, I quote, after that, we'll be picking up where we left off in Sonic 225. Now, he says this, now Ian Flynn says this, hinting that the premise of Genesis will not completely alter the main title's universe. But there will be some serious ramifications. Namely, the life of one character will hang in the balance. Now, they close out this article by stating Flynn did not want to indicate what characters might be affected after Genesis ends, since this is a reboot. He said, and this is Ian again, Ian Flynn, he says, since this is a reboot, seeing who comes back and how is part of the storyline. Now, to me, this sounds very familiar, folks. Very, very familiar. Because it reminds me a little bit of when Mobius, 25 years to 30 years later, first appeared in the main titles. Now, before I talk about that, I want to show you something here. This, I think you can see that, is one of the sketch arts from Sonic Genesis. Right here. I think you can see that. Now, everybody's been wondering what is going on. Well, apparently, it sounds like just for the summer, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But it sounds like they're taking a break from 225. In other words, it's like 225 is the cliffhanging series, or the cliffhanging season finale. You know how television shows always do season finales, and they always sometimes leave that season finale on a cliffhanger, and then all of a sudden the next season we get that conclusion to the cliffhanger? Well, apparently that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like 225 is going to be a cliffhanger issue, and we're going to have to wait till 230 to find out what happens. Because according to what Ian states there, they'll be continuing. Let me see here. They'll be picking up where they left off in 225. Now how the characters are affected, we don't know. And how Genesis plays in to the main storyline, we don't know. But from what I can deduce, apparently Sonic Genesis, I think we should have all saw this coming, is going to be like Mobius years later when it first got introduced. It's just going to be its own self-contained story arc that's going to kind of reboot the earlier issues and everything on how like the freedom fighters met and everything. That's how it's going to go, from what I could tell. Then, that way, after it's all said and done, we go back apparently to where we left off in 225. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure a lot of other people that have read this article could be wrong. But that's just my conclusion on it. I just feel that's exactly what's going to happen, because it reminds me a lot of when Mobius Years Later took place. When Mobius Years Later first debuted, that's what it kind of feels like. It's like they're taking a break. It's like what Ian Flynn's doing, like I said, it's exactly what you would see in television shows, animated or live action, or even in movies nowadays, where you end one, well, you kind of do a finale, like a season finale, but you end it on a cliffhanger, and then you got to wait until the fall to find out if that cliffhanger is going to be finished up. So in other words, from June, July, August, and September, we're going to have to wait till basically October, the end of September into October, to find out what happens with 225. So in other words, it sounds like Sonic Genesis is sort of like a self-contained story. In other words, it's just being published for the 20th anniversary. That's all it's being done for. And then, like Ian states there, and again, I'll put a link down below, you can read this, they'll be picking up where they left off in 225. So in other words, so basically this is what I get from it. They're going to kind of reboot the origins, on like how Sonic and the Freedom Fighters met. Then we're going to go back to things, we're going to continue off in 220. We're going to continue from 225 into 230. 230 is basically going to pick up where 225 left off. Now, he does state, which I think will throw some people off. He does state at the end, who comes back and how is all part of the storyline. So basically, Genesis does sound like it will tie in to the main continuity, but who comes back after Genesis is going to be the question. So even it sounds like Ian Flynn's not even telling Newsarama everything. But if what the artist close to Ian Flynn have said, what Ian Flynn has said himself about the characters, that nothing's going to happen to them, then them coming back is going to take place. But whatever happens afterwards, we'll find out. But to me, it sounds like Genesis will sort of tie in to the main comic. But if I read right, I know I read it here somewhere. Now, they say it's being touted possibly as a reboot, but as I'm trying to find here, oh yeah, he says here at the end, again, I quote, this is what Ian Flynn says, he says, I quote, after that, we'll be picking up where we left off in Sonic 225. And he quotes, that Genesis will not, he hints at this, that the premise of Genesis will not completely alter the main title's universe, but there will be some serious ramifications, namely the life of one character will hang in the balance. So in other words, the Genesis storyline to me is sort of like Mobius Years Later. And it sounds like 225 is going to be like a cliffhanger ending that we're just going to have to read 230 to find out what happens. Now, if Genesis does tie in there in some way, then so be it. But it sounds like, to me, Genesis will not completely alter, as he said, the main Sonic universe, but there will be ramifications. So in other words, we'll find out exactly what happens at the end of 2. Basically, we're going to have to wait till 230 to find out the conclusion in 225. That's what it sounds like to me. But that's all I can say about